Hey witches, it's Friday, March 13th, and I'm your morning witch, because it's morning somewhere, or everybody's morning something, sometime. Anywho, it is Friday the 13th, and it is Folklore Friday, and whereas I have covered in depth certain sections of Friday the 13th folklore, I don't know that there's a single episode that has all of them listed together. So instead of going in depth this time, we're just going to talk about the folklore that exists behind Friday the 13th. The oldest folklore behind Friday the 13th being the association with the Slavic goddess Mokash, the mother of all mothers, the moist earth which gives life. She is honored on Friday the 13th. Fridays are her days anyway, but then Friday the 13th is even more special for her and her celebrations, so you can look into that. Additionally, Friday the 13th is associated with Hecate, who is a goddess that is likely from Mesopotamia or Assyrian cultures and was so freaking fabulous that the Greeks adopted her, and she is considered part of the Greek pantheon. She is the trifold goddess, maiden, mother, and crone, three-faced, three-way crossroads. And you can look into the 13 keys of Hecate and her association on how to celebrate her for Friday the 13th if you are so inclined. Now, there's also folklore from later, after these goddesses, right? So more to look into should you choose, such as it is stated, and according to the written record, the Knights Templar were taken down on Friday the 13th. It was a plot from the church to take down a rival power. The Knights Templar were the origination of banks, or maybe would have had banks anyway, but because of the Knights Templar, we have banks, the banking system. It started out of the Crusade system of trying to convert the Middle East to Christianity back during the Crusade days. What was that, like 1100s, 1200s? Okay, so in between the goddesses and the Crusades, there was the Last Supper with Jesus, and it is folklore or legend that Judas Iscariot was the 13th guest to arrive, and was, the Last Supper was on a Friday, so i.e. Friday and the number 13. However, all of this seems to just be folklore that happens to line up correctly. Granted, the practices of honoring Mokash and Hecate on Friday the 13th are not folklore, but I'm a witch and I honor those goddesses, so I'm going to bring them up for Folklore Friday. However, the rest of this would fall into folklore, but regardless, it is just folklore that was made to match a fear that came about in the 1600s. All of a sudden, having 13 guests at the dinner table was considered unlucky, and Fridays were considered unfavorable days. So they coupled to create a superstition or a generalized fear around Friday the 13th. Then we got a bunch of superstitions that went along with that, such as, it's always a superstition to not allow black cat to cross your path, or to break a mirror, or to walk under a ladder. And growing up, I was always told that on Friday the 13th, these treacherous traps are much worse should you fall into one on Friday the 13th as opposed to another day, because Friday the 13th was so unlucky. such as should you break should you break a mirror on Friday the 13th, instead of 7 years bad luck, you would have 7 times 7 years bad luck. I don't know if that's still folklore that's going around or superstition that's going around these days, but that is what I was taught growing up in the 80s and early 90s. Anyway, that has been your Folklore Friday for Friday the 13th, and feel free, please, to look further into all of these things and more, because there is more lore behind Friday the 13th, as well as April Fool's Day. I almost did a thing where my brain confused the two and I said wrong information. Anyway, you can check out my previous years in Friday the 13th episodes to see more in-depth information on any of the things that I just mentioned, except for the Judas Iscariot one. I don't think I've ever covered that before. That said, have a blessed Friday the 13th, and definitely look up ways that you can honor Mother Mokosh and the Blessed Hecate today. Bye.